The old debate, race as class or race and class. I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. So I don't want to get into a history of the whole relationship between races and classes in D&D because I covered that a little bit in other videos and it's really an in-depth topic on its own. I want to talk about the difference you get from one versus the other, but a little bit of background. Um, and what a lot of people don't realize is that the original D&D actually had race and class. It wasn't a race or class system in the original Little Brown books. It kind of changed once Greyhawk and Blackmore came out, but in the original, it's very clear that you had a class and you had fighting man, magic user, or cleric. And then non-human races like dwarves and elves, dwarves may opt only for the fighting class. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. And elves can begin either as fighting men or magic users and switch class whenever they choose, as long as it's not in the middle of an adventure. So they were actually doing race and class. There were just very few classes, very few races, and very few options for non-human characters. That changed, and then that changed with Greyhawk and Blackmore and the some of the supplements and stuff like that. Supplements? Phooey! Back in my day, we had the 3 Little Brown books, and that's all we had, and we liked it that way, dagnabbit! And it kind of morphed into what we saw in Holmes Basic and later versions of Basic, where the different races like halflings and elves and dwarves were treated as classes unto themselves with abilities and powers just like anything else. So in the character class tables, for example, to take this under the classes, we have clerics, dwarves, elves, fighters, halflings, magic users, and thieves. The races are mixed in with classes because each race has some of the characteristics unique to itself, and they just kind of map onto the classes. So that's the schism. Is where do you have um, the dividing line? Because obviously in AD&D, you have a list of races and you have a list of classes, and then you have another list of which races can be which classes and how high they can go in level, and can you multi-class and stuff like that, which takes the place of the elves' ability to switch from one to the other, and so on and so forth. So that's the main schism, is that in this system, you have just a list of classes that happen to have some non-human races in them. And in here, you have a distinct lists of races and classes, and they can mix and match. So you can have like an elven cleric or a dwarven thief or something like that, which at least in this version of basic, you don't have nearly that much flexibility. If you're an elf, you're an elf, and you can fight and you can cast spells, and that's it. If you're a halfling, you don't get that, or dwarf, you don't even get that much flexibility. There's no such thing as a halfling thief in this version of basic. You're a halfling and you have certain things that you can do, but you are not a member of the thief class. So okay, so that's the definitions, and I've spent way longer on this than I want to do. To get to the meat of it, what's the benefits of it? I mean, obviously, having a list of classes that includes several races is easier. It's much more straightforward. If you're a very beginning player and you have no idea what's going on, you have no idea what you're doing, it's going to be easier to say, okay, I want to play an elf because an elf can do this. If you're a little more advanced, and it is right in the title, advanced D&D, um, then you are going to, in theory anyway, you're going to have a little more footing. You're going to know what's going on, and you're going to be able to have a little more insight into making those kinds of choices, because in the race and class system, it's going to have a lot more flexibility because you can have an elven magic user thief, which is something you can't do in basic, right? Because elves do certain things. They don't cross borders. And same thing, in advanced D&D and the systems that followed it, you can have races with multiple things. That's the advanced part, and that's the thing that gives you the more flexibility. The trade-off is it's more complicated because you have to make all these choices. If you want to choose, you could just be an elven cleric or an elven thief or whatever. That's a perfectly valid choice in a race and class system that you don't get in or a race as class system. I know I'm messing that up at some point. Um, so anyway, so that's the thing. It's simplicity versus flexibility. That is the basic definition here, right? That's the dividing line between these two things. And there's all kinds of other things, multi-classing, and there's class level limits and all that stuff. But I'm not going to get into that. I just want to talk about what's preferable. I've been playing this game since 1977. I don't need the simplicity. I enjoy having the options. If you've seen my RPG Adventures Dark and Deep, you can tell I like options. I like tons of options. And I want to have those options available for my character. I want to be able to customize my character along those lines so that, if I have a particular thing in mind, I can say, okay, I want to be this class and this race, and boom, it'll work. Obviously there's limitations, for game balance reasons mostly. Humans can't do that because they make up for it by having unlimited level progression for most classes. Whereas non-humans usually only have unlimited progression as thieves, which is a thing that goes back to the Little Brown Books and the Greyhawk supplement. It's one of those historical things that just kind of stayed in there. And then of course, second edition, third edition, and all, everything changes with editions. But I'm focusing here on first because it's what I know the best. And I personally like the flexibility. There are others who just want to have that streamlined. It's simpler, and I like simple, and I just want to do that and focus on things that are happening in the game, and that's perfectly acceptable. There's no right or wrong thing. People who like race as class versus people who like race and class. It's just personal preference, and I know most players that I know are comfortable doing either. It just depends on the version of the game that you're playing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing in the slightest. So I'm going to be. This is of course a collaboration with Tekar's Tavern and the DM and friends, and I don't know what they're going to be saying in their videos. But please do watch theirs, subscribe, like all that good stuff. If you're watching it on my channel, and so I don't know if I'm being a reconciliator between the two of them or whatever, but be aware of the differences, be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of each option, but either one is perfectly acceptable. And in fact, I could even foresee a game in which you had both. You could either play this is an elf as class, or you could pick an elven multi-class or an elven single class. I could see combining them in some way. You could have races and then races as part of the class. It's certainly a possibility in a world like this where you have things like that. But hey, maybe that'll be one of my next Adventures Dark and Deep books will have something like that in it. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on the question of race and class and all that good stuff. Please do sound off in the comments. And a reminder, if you're so interested, please do try to check out my Adventures Dark and Deep. I'll try to put a link up here somewhere as the credits roll. And hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will talk to you all later.